What happened when friends awoke an ancient evil in the woods? The Ritual of Shadows. Chapter 1: The Whispering Woods. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the dense canopy of the woods. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, whispering secrets as Ethan, Lila, Max, and Sara unloaded their gear from the car, excitement crackling in the air. The group had decided on a weekend camping trip to escape the monotony of college life. A much-needed retreat from late-night study sessions and relentless exams. Ethan, the unofficial leader of the pack, was already setting up the fire pit, his enthusiasm infectious. He was tall and confident, with an easy smile that often masked a deeper recklessness. As he cracked jokes and bantered with Max, a wiry jokester with a penchant for mischief, Lila stood off to the side, her brow furrowed slightly. "Hey, Ethan," Lila called, her voice tinged with hesitation. "Are you sure about this place? I read some pretty strange stuff online." Max snorted, adjusting the straps on his backpack. "Come on, Lila. It's just a bunch of campfire stories. What's the worst that could happen? Ghosts? Monsters? It's all in good fun." But Lila wasn't convinced. Her mind raced with tales she had heard growing up. A local legend about a ritual that had once taken place in these very woods. A gathering of desperate souls seeking power from an ancient force. They had failed spectacularly, their cries echoing in the night as they vanished, swallowed by the earth. She couldn't shake the image of their anguished faces from her thoughts. "Seriously, I'm telling you, there's a reason they say to avoid this area after dark," Lila continued, casting a cautious glance toward the thick trees that loomed ominously around them. "People used to come here for a ritual. They thought it was a joke, and, well, you know how those stories go." "Give me a break," Ethan replied with a dismissive wave. "We're not here to perform any rituals. We're just camping. Relax. You've got to learn to let loose." He shot her a reassuring grin, the kind that had always made her feel safe, even when doubt crept in. Max chimed in. "Exactly. Let's make some memories. How about a little fun before the night really kicks in?" As they gathered around the fire pit, the sun finally vanished, replaced by a blanket of stars that twinkled like scattered diamonds. Ethan's excitement was contagious, and even Lila found herself smiling despite her lingering apprehension. The flickering flames danced, casting playful shadows that twisted and turned against the trees. Then, as if sparked by the fire's glow, Max suggested an idea that sent a ripple of energy through the group. "Let's do something wild. We could perform a mock ritual, just like the one Lila described. You know, for laughs." His eyes sparkled with mischief, clearly thrilled at the prospect of turning a scary story into a light-hearted prank. Ethan's face lit up, clearly on board. "That's perfect. We could even make it a challenge, like who can last the longest without freaking out." Sara, usually the most cautious of the group, hesitated, her expression clouded by concern. "Are you sure that's a good idea? It could really mess with the energy out here." "Oh, come on, Sara," Max shot back, rolling his eyes. "It's just for fun. What's the worst that could happen? You're not scared, are you?" Ethan chimed in. "Exactly. We'll just play along with the legend. It'll be a hilarious story to tell later." Lila bit her lip, uncertainty gnawing at her. She wanted to join in the laughter, to fit in with the carefree spirit of her friends. But the tales of vanished souls and the echoes of their despair loomed large in her mind. "I just think we should be careful." "Stop worrying, Lila," Max laughed, clapping her on the back. "This is what college is about, adventures. Besides, if anything weird happens, we'll just laugh it off." The air crackled with anticipation as they gathered the materials for their makeshift ritual. As they laid out the items, candles, a makeshift altar of stones, and scraps of paper with hastily scribbled words, they couldn't shake the feeling that the night was shifting around them, the shadows deepening as the fire crackled and flickered. Ethan took charge, his voice booming as he recited a parody of the ritualistic words they had crafted, his bravado masking the tension that hung in the air. Lila watched as her friends laughed, their voices rising in the stillness of the woods, unaware of the power they were about to invoke. But as the last syllable left Ethan's lips, an unnatural chill swept through the clearing, the laughter dying in their throats. The fire flickered violently, and for a moment the woods seemed to hold its breath. In that suspended moment, a whisper danced through the trees, a faint echo that sent a shiver down Lila's spine. She exchanged a worried glance with Sara, who looked equally unsettled. The woods were alive, and they were no longer alone. As the shadows deepened around them, the group remained blissfully unaware that they had crossed an invisible line into something far more sinister than they could have ever imagined. The night was just beginning, and the whispering woods held secrets that would soon awaken. Chapter 2. The Night of Shadows. The fire crackled brightly, casting a warm glow that danced over the group as they gathered supplies for their mock ritual. Ethan, invigorated by the thrill of the moment, took charge with an infectious energy that drew the others into his fervor. He moved with confidence, rummaging through their gear with an enthusiasm that masked the creeping doubt in Lila's mind. "All right, everyone, let's make this epic," Ethan declared, his voice ringing out against the backdrop of the darkening woods. He grabbed a bundle of candles, their wax surfaces gleaming like tiny beacons in the encroaching night. "We'll need these to set the mood. Who knows, maybe they'll even keep the ghosts at bay." He chuckled, tossing a wink at Sara, who offered a hesitant smile in return. Lila stood off to the side, watching as the boys joked and laughed, but her stomach twisted with unease. She could feel the weight of the forest pressing in, a silent observer of their antics. Yet, she couldn't deny the excitement sparking in her chest. She had come here to escape, to have fun with her friends. Maybe this would all just be harmless laughter. "Max, grab that old blanket from the car," Ethan instructed, glancing over his shoulder. "We can use it as our ceremonial altar. It'll make it look more authentic." Max saluted playfully, bounding toward the vehicle. As he rummaged through the trunk, Ethan turned back to the group, his smile wide and inviting. "This is going to be legendary. Just imagine telling everyone we actually summoned something. We'll be the kings and queens of campus." The others chuckled, their spirits lifting as they busily arranged their makeshift setup. Sara, ever the practical one, fished out a small flashlight, illuminating the darkened corners of their campsite. "Just remember to keep it light-hearted," she reminded, her voice barely rising above the sound of rustling leaves. Sure, Ethan replied with a wave of his hand. "It's all in good fun. Right, Lila?" "Right," she echoed, though her heart raced with a hint of apprehension. As they finalized their preparations, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were teetering on the edge of something unknown. When they finally gathered around their altar, the atmosphere shifted. The flickering candle flames danced wildly as if a breeze swept through the clearing, but the air was still. Lila felt a shiver run down her spine, an instinctual warning that she couldn't quite articulate. The whispers in the woods, the shadows creeping just out of sight, something about it all felt wrong. "Let's do this," Ethan proclaimed, his voice booming with bravado. The others joined in, their laughter ringing through the air as they formed a loose circle. Hands joined together. Lila stood between Sara and Max, feeling the warmth of their hands but also the growing tension in the air. "Repeat after me," Ethan called, leading them in a parody of the ancient words he had cobbled together from various online sources. The group chimed in, their voices merging in an enthusiastic chant, the rhythmic incantation a stark contrast to the growing darkness around them. As they progressed, the sounds of the forest began to change. The rustling leaves, once a soothing backdrop, turned into a symphony of unsettling whispers. Lila glanced toward the tree line, her unease growing. It felt as if the very woods were listening, watching, waiting for something to unfold. Then, with an abruptness that sent a jolt through the group, the temperature dropped. A coldness wrapped around them like a shroud, and the shadows cast by the fire grew longer, more sinister. The flame flickered violently, almost as if struggling against an unseen force. "What was that?" Lila asked, her voice shaking slightly. She tried to dismiss her fear, but it clung to her like a heavy fog. The others exchanged uneasy glances, laughter fading into a nervous silence. "It's just the wind," Ethan said dismissively, though his bravado faltered for a moment. "Don't be such a scaredy cat, Lila." But as they continued, strange silhouettes began to flit between the trees, darting in and out of the corners of their vision. Max squinted into the darkness, his face twisting in confusion. "Did you see that?" he whispered, his bravado waning. I thought I saw something move. Probably just a deer, Ethan replied, though his voice lacked conviction. The laughter had faded, replaced by an undercurrent of tension that thrummed through the air. A deep, rumbling sound echoed from somewhere within the woods, a low growl that resonated with an otherworldly timbre. The friends froze, their hearts pounding in unison. "Okay, maybe this isn't such a good idea," Sara murmured, her eyes darting around as the shadows danced menacingly at the edge of their firelight. Suddenly, the ground beneath them seemed to pulse, a tremor that rattled their very bones. The friends stumbled back, fear flashing in their eyes as they grasped at each other. "Guys, this isn't funny anymore," Lila exclaimed, her earlier misgivings rushing to the surface. "We need to stop." But as they stepped back, the shadows thickened, encroaching on their circle of light. The oppressive darkness swallowed their laughter and bravado, leaving only a tense silence that hung in the air like a storm cloud. Ethan, though shaken, took a deep breath, trying to rally their spirits once more. "We've come this far. Let's just finish it. It's all in good fun, right?" The others hesitated, their instincts screaming to flee. But they were drawn together by the bond of friendship and a shared sense of adventure. So they stood, rooted in place, as the shadows deepened around them, unaware that they had awakened something far more ancient and powerful than any of them could comprehend. The night had only just begun, and the woods were waiting. Chapter 3: Echoes of the Past. As the night deepened, an unsettling atmosphere enveloped the woods, transforming their playful camping trip into something more sinister. The flickering flames of the fire cast eerie shadows that danced across the trees, creating an illusion of movement that played tricks on their minds. Each gust of wind carried with it soft whispers, almost as if the very forest were alive, sharing secrets that were never meant to be heard. Lila shifted uncomfortably, her heart racing as the air thickened with an almost palpable tension. The laughter that had filled their circle earlier was now replaced by a heavy silence, punctuated only by the occasional crackle of the fire. She exchanged glances with Sara, whose expression mirrored her own unease, both women acutely aware that something was amiss. "Did you hear that?" Lila finally broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. The sounds around them felt layered, shifting with each moment. It was as if the woods were breathing, exhaling the long-held memories of those who had come before. "It's just the wind," Ethan insisted, though his tone lacked its earlier conviction. He was trying to maintain control, to hold on to the thread of bravado that had spurred them to start this mock ritual. "This is all part of the experience." But as the shadows flickered and danced, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that they were teetering on the edge of something much darker. She leaned closer to Sara, who was visibly shaken. "What if we stop this now?" Lila urged. "What if we just pack up and leave?" Sara's eyes darted to the darkness that surrounded them. "I know some of the stories," she whispered, fear threading her words. "There are tales of those who tried to commune with the forces in these woods. They didn't always return. If we don't stop..." "Stop what?" Ethan interjected, cutting her off. "It's just a prank. We're not really summoning anything." His dismissive attitude only served to isolate Sara further, her expression turning from concern to frustration. Lila wanted to voice her agreement with Sara, but the weight of Ethan's gaze made her hesitate. The pull of friendship and loyalty tangled with her instincts, leaving her feeling trapped between two worlds. Suddenly, Max, who had been unusually quiet, stood abruptly, his eyes wide with an intensity that sent a shiver through the group. "No, you don't understand," he exclaimed, his voice rising above the sound of the wind. "I can feel it. Something is here. I can connect with it." "What are you talking about?" Ethan replied, his bravado fading as he took a step back, unsure of what to make of Max's sudden shift. Max's gaze turned distant, as if he were peering into another realm. "There's something in the trees. It wants us to know. It's calling me." His breath came quick, and Lila could see the excitement mingling with fear in his eyes. "Max, you're scaring me," Sara said, her voice trembling. "This isn't a joke anymore. You need to come back to reality." But Max remained unfazed, lost in whatever connection he believed he had forged. He began to walk toward the edge of their firelight, drawn by an unseen force. "I have to go. I need to see it." "Don't!" Lila shouted, instinctively reaching out to grab his arm. but he shook her off, his determination a stark contrast to her rising panic. "Let him be," Ethan said, trying to sound tough, but unable to mask the worry in his voice. "If he wants to play with shadows, that's his choice." Yet, as he spoke, a chill crept through the air, and the shadows around them seemed to grow darker, more alive. "Max, please," Sara pleaded, her voice rising in desperation. "This isn't safe. We need to stick together." The atmosphere thickened with uncertainty, and the whispers in the trees grew louder, a symphony of unintelligible voices that echoed the group's mounting fear. It was as if the forest itself was responding to Max's call, a foreboding chorus warning them of the danger that lay ahead. But Max was lost, stepping further into the darkness beyond the light of the fire. "It's beautiful," he murmured, his voice trailing off into the night, a note of wonder punctuating the tension. "You don't understand what it is." In that moment, Lila felt a rush of adrenaline. "We can't let him go alone." She turned to Ethan, her eyes pleading. "We need to bring him back. This isn't a game anymore." Reluctantly, Ethan nodded, his bravado waning in the face of uncertainty. Okay, let's just follow him," he said, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. "But stay close. We don't want to get lost." With hesitant steps, they moved as a group, the fire's warmth receding behind them as they ventured into the encroaching shadows. Lila's heart raced, and as they crossed the threshold from light into darkness, the world around them felt different. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices swirling in the wind, and with each step, the air grew heavier, saturated with an ancient presence. As they approached Max, who stood transfixed at the edge of the clearing, Lila caught sight of something shifting among the trees. A flicker of movement caught her eye, a shadow darting just beyond the reach of their light. Fear coursed through her veins as she realized that the darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It felt sentient, as if it were alive, watching, waiting. "Max," Ethan called, urgency lacing his voice. "Get back here." But Max didn't respond. He was entranced, his face illuminated by an ethereal glow that seemed to emanate from the depths of the woods. "It's so close," he whispered, almost to himself. "I can feel it. It wants to show us." Lila's instincts screamed at her to turn back, to flee from the malevolent energy that was gathering in the air. Yet she couldn't just leave her friends behind. They had ventured too far into the night, and the consequences of their actions were beginning to unfold in ways they had never imagined. The air crackled with tension, and as the shadows shifted, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of awakening something that had long been buried. Something that was waiting for a moment like this to rise again. Chapter 4: The Fraying Threads. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically, a thick veil of mistrust hanging heavy over the group. As they stood at the edge of the clearing, the weight of their situation pressed down on them, each breath laden with unspoken fears. What had once been a carefree camping trip had devolved into a landscape of tension and paranoia. Lila glanced around at her friends, noting the growing unease etched on their faces. Max, who had once seemed so enthralled, now wore an expression of confusion, his excitement fading into fear. Ethan, still clinging to the idea of a prank, had lost some of his earlier bravado, while Sara stood off to the side, her eyes darting nervously between them, as if she were already sensing the rift that was about to widen. "We need to talk," Lila finally said, her voice steady despite the chaos brewing inside her. "Ethan, this was your idea, and look where it's gotten us. We're not having fun anymore. We need to acknowledge what we've done." Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but Sara beat him to it. "You can't keep pretending this is a joke. There's something wrong here. We've awakened something we can't control." Her voice cracked, the fear evident in her eyes. "I told you all. This area is cursed." Max shifted uneasily, glancing toward the darkness that surrounded them. "Maybe we should just go back to the campsite," he suggested, his voice a whisper. "I'm starting to feel like something's watching us." "Exactly," Lila said, her frustration boiling over. "We can't just ignore it. We should have never gone through with that ritual. We've put ourselves in danger." Ethan's expression hardened. "So what do you suggest we do? Just sit here and wait for whatever this is to come for us? We can't just run away." The tension escalated, voices rising as fear twisted their words into sharp barbs. "You think this is just some prank? It's not a joke anymore, Ethan." Lila pressed, her heart racing. Look at us. We're lost, and I don't know how to get back. In that moment, the group's unity began to fray, each accusation further pulling them apart. Ethan's frustration turned to anger, and he shot Sara a glare. If you hadn't been so negative from the start, maybe we wouldn't be in this mess. Negative? Sara's voice rose incredulously. I was trying to warn you, but you wouldn't listen. You just wanted to have your fun, no matter the cost. Lila stepped between them, desperate to restore some semblance of order. This isn't helping. We need to find a way out of here, together. Max looked toward the trees, sensing something moving just beyond their line of sight. What if we try to retrace our steps? We might find our way back if we go back to where we started. But the idea felt futile, and an unsettling realization settled in the pit of Lila's stomach. What if we can't? She whispered, her heart racing. The shadows seemed to thicken, closing in on them as if the very forest conspired against their escape. Ethan turned away, his gaze sweeping the darkened woods, and then it caught on something, a glimmer in the distance that stood apart from the flickering shadows. Wait, what's that? He asked, moving forward without waiting for an answer. Ethan, where are you going? Lila called after him, but he was already striding into the gloom. Against her better judgment, she followed, with Sara and Max hesitantly trailing behind. As they approached the source of light, Lila's heart sank. It was a hidden altar, half obscured by overgrown vines and shadows. The stone surface was etched with strange symbols, their meanings long lost to time. Candles, still flickering, surrounded the altar, their flames dancing eerily in the night breeze. This is what we awakened, Ethan breathed, his face pale as realization washed over him. This is the ritual. A chill crept into Lila's bones as she took in the altar's grim details. The atmosphere felt charged with energy, an oppressive force pressing against them, demanding attention. The laughter that had once echoed in the woods was replaced by a haunting silence, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. What do we do? Max whispered, the fear in his voice palpable. Can we undo it? I don't know, Ethan admitted, staring at the altar in horror. But we can't just leave it like this. Sara stepped back, her eyes wide with fear. We shouldn't have come here. We should have listened. We've opened a door that can't be closed. The tension between them escalated as panic took root. We have to try, Ethan insisted, determination creeping back into his tone. We need to finish what we started and try to put things right. You're insane, Sara shot back, her voice trembling. This isn't something we can control. It's bigger than us. Maybe you're just too scared to do anything. Ethan's voice rose, but beneath the bravado, Lila could sense his own fear, raw and unyielding. The rift between them widened, fueled by desperation and uncertainty. In that moment, Lila felt the ground shift beneath them, the whispers in the trees rising to a fever pitch. Shadows coalesced around them, thick and heavy, threatening to swallow them whole. The friends stood at the precipice of chaos, each grappling with their own fears and doubts, and the very fabric of their trust began to unravel. Listen to me, Lila shouted, desperate to regain control. We can't let this tear us apart. We need each other now more than ever. But her words fell into the darkness, drowned out by the growing cacophony of the forest. As the shadows danced around them, the reality of their predicament settled in. They were no longer just college friends on a camping trip. They were tangled in a web of ancient forces that they had unwittingly awakened, and the night was far from over. Chapter 5: The Reckoning. The air around them crackled with a sinister energy as the ancient entities stirred, breaking free from the veil of shadows. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over the group, tightening around them like a noose. The whispers that had previously been faint and elusive grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of voices, each one filled with malice and despair. Dark secrets clawed their way to the surface, unraveling the very fabric of trust that had held the friends together. What is happening? Max shouted, backing away, his eyes wide with terror. What did we do? Lila could feel her heart racing as the shadows swirled, coiling around them like serpents. We have to stay calm, she urged, though her own voice trembled. We need to find a way to fight this. But the whispers had taken on a life of their own, echoing through the trees, weaving a web of doubt among them. Each shadow that flickered revealed something personal, Deep-seated insecurities, hidden fears, unspoken grudges. "You're the reason we're here," one shadow hissed at Ethan, its voice dripping with venom. "You brought this upon us." "No," Ethan shot back, anger flaring. "This isn't my fault. We all agreed to this." Sara stood frozen, the weight of the entity's presence overwhelming her. "We need to get out of here, now," she screamed. But the shadows pressed closer, wrapping around her ankles, anchoring her in place. As panic gripped them, Max turned to flee, but a cold gust swept through the clearing, sending him sprawling. "Don't run," Lila yelled, grabbing his arm. "We can't let it separate us." But the shadows had other plans. With a sudden surge, one of the darker forms lunged forward, coalescing into a grotesque figure, an embodiment of their fears and regrets. Its features were ever-shifting, reflecting the worst parts of themselves, each visage a torment of betrayal and loss. "Your bonds mean nothing here," the entity rasped, its voice a chilling whisper that resonated in their bones. "You will pay for awakening me." The group's resolve began to crumble as the entity taunted them, whispering secrets meant to drive wedges between them. Lila felt her heart sink as the shadows whispered accusations. Old arguments resurfacing, moments of jealousy, misunderstandings, all amplified in the entity's insidious grip. "Stop," Ethan cried, his voice breaking. "We need to stick together. We can fight this." But as the entity advanced, it preyed on their vulnerabilities. The air thickened with tension, and Sara, overwhelmed by terror, suddenly broke. "I can't take this anymore." "I'm sorry," she shouted, stepping back from the group. The shadows lunged at her, and in a moment of despair she allowed herself to be engulfed. "No!" Lila screamed, reaching out, but it was too late. The entity absorbed Sara, her terrified scream echoing through the woods before it fell silent. The loss hit the group like a physical blow, leaving them reeling in horror and grief. Max fell to his knees, his hands grasping at the dirt. "What have we done?" he moaned, tears streaming down his face. "We're responsible for this." Ethan stood paralyzed, guilt flooding through him. I didn't mean for this to happen," he stammered, his bravado stripped away. "We need to fix this. We have to find a way to appease it." Lila's heart ached, but she could feel the fire of determination rising within her. "We can't let Sara's sacrifice be in vain. We need to confront this entity together. We need to face our fears and find a way to fight back." Max looked up, the despair in his eyes slowly shifting to resolve. "You're right. We have to do something. We can't let it take anyone else." Gathering their courage, the three remaining friends stood together, forming a fragile alliance against the darkness that threatened to consume them. Ethan, still racked with guilt, recalled the ancient lore Sara had mentioned earlier. "Maybe if we reverse the ritual, we can weaken it. We can call upon the forest's protection." "Let's head back to the altar," Lila urged, her heart racing. "If we can reach it, we might have a chance to make things right." As they moved through the trees, the shadows shifted around them, growing more aggressive, snapping like whips at their heels. The whispers became a chorus of taunts, each word dripping with malice, sowing seeds of doubt in their minds. But Lila pressed on, her determination pushing her forward despite the fear clawing at her insides. When they reached the altar, the candles flickered wildly, and the symbols glowed faintly in the darkness. "We need to perform the counter-ritual," Ethan said, his voice steadying as he focused on the task ahead. "We can do this together." Lila nodded, her heart pounding. "Let's remember what we came here for. We're stronger together, and we won't let this darkness win." As they began to chant, drawing upon the power of the forest and their own resolve, the shadows surged against them, a wave of darkness threatening to break through. The entity roared in fury, its form twisting and writhing, desperate to maintain its grip on their fears. But Lila could feel the energy building, fueled by their shared grief and determination. With every word they spoke, they pushed back against the darkness, reclaiming their strength and unity. In that moment, they became a beacon of light against the overwhelming tide, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope could emerge. They had lost one friend, but they would not let that sacrifice be forgotten. They would fight, not just for themselves, but for Sara's memory and the bonds that had brought them together in the first place. The ancient evil would not win. Not today. Chapter 6, Eclipsed by Shadows. With their hearts pounding and desperation rising, Lila, Ethan, and Max formed a tight circle around the altar. Their breaths coming in quick, shallow gasps. The air crackled with tension, heavy with the anticipation of what was to come. Shadows writhed around them, their dark tendrils flickering like flames, urging them to surrender to the darkness. "Remember why we're here," Lila whispered, gripping Ethan's hand tightly. "We do this for Sara and for ourselves." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. He glanced at Max, who looked as though he were on the brink of collapse. "We can't let fear control us. We need to channel our strength into this ritual. It's our only chance." Max took a deep breath, his gaze steadying. "Let's do this." As they began to chant, their voices echoed through the clearing, intertwining with the whispers of the shadows. Each syllable carried a weight, a plea to the forest for protection against the malevolent force that threatened to consume them. The flickering candles flared to life, illuminating the symbols carved into the altar, casting eerie reflections that danced across the ground. But the entity was relentless. It surged forward, a swirling mass of darkness, attempting to drown out their words with a deafening roar. The shadows wrapped around the three friends, whispering their deepest insecurities, magnifying their fears. "You'll never escape," it hissed, its voice slithering into their minds. "You're weak, just like she was." Ethan felt his resolve waver for a split second, but Lila's grip tightened on his hand. "Focus," she shouted, her voice slicing through the darkness. "We can't let it win." With renewed determination, they pressed on, their voices rising in a harmonious blend of defiance. The ground trembled beneath them, and the air thickened as the entity fought against their chant. Max's face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead, but he stood firm, drawing strength from his friends. Suddenly, a bolt of icy wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing the candles. Shadows engulfed them, and they found themselves plunged into darkness. Panic surged, but they remembered their purpose. "We can't stop," Lila shouted, her voice unwavering. "We must keep going." Just as they began to feel the weight of despair pulling them under, a flicker of light ignited from within them, a flicker of the bond they had shared. In that moment, their collective energy surged forth, pushing against the encroaching shadows. "We are not afraid," they declared, their voices echoing with newfound strength. The entity shrieked, a sound of pure rage and fear. It writhed, struggling to maintain its form as the friends' chant grew louder, more powerful. Shadows began to retreat, recoiling from the radiant energy emanating from the altar. With one final, desperate push, they channeled every ounce of willpower into their words. "We command you, ancient force, to return to the darkness from whence you came," Lila cried, her voice breaking the oppressive atmosphere. As the last syllable left their lips, a blinding light erupted from the altar, engulfing the clearing. The shadows writhed in agony, their whispers turning to wails. For a heartbeat, everything stood still. Then, with a thunderous crack, the darkness shattered, exploding outward like a dark star collapsing upon itself. A profound silence fell over the woods, the air thick with the aftermath of their confrontation. Ethan, Lila, and Max stood breathless, their hearts racing as they took in their surroundings. The oppressive presence had lifted, leaving a haunting emptiness in its wake. But victory came at a cost. The woods around them felt different now, forever altered by the ritual. The chilling silence hinted at the remnants of the ancient evil lurking just beyond the periphery of their vision. The forest, once alive with whispers, now felt like a tomb, holding its breath in reverence of what had transpired. "We did it," Lila whispered, her voice trembling. "But at what cost?" Max's eyes were hollow, haunted by the memory of Sara's sacrifice. "We lost her. We have to live with that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan felt the weight of their shared grief pressing down on him. "We can't forget her. We owe it to her to remember what happened here," he said, determination flaring in his chest. "We'll honor her by living, by carrying her memory with us." As they made their way back through the woods, the shadows felt less threatening, yet they remained aware of the silent eyes that seemed to watch them from the darkness. The friends emerged from the trees, stepping into the open air, but the weight of the forest still clung to them, a reminder of the horrors they had faced. They had triumphed, but they were forever changed. The experience had bonded them in ways they could not articulate. threading their lives together through shared trauma and loss. They knew that the woods would remain a silent witness to their ordeal, a place where the veil between the living and the ancient could never be fully closed. As they walked away, the silence of the woods whispered its secrets once more, hinting that the ancient evil was still there, waiting patiently for the next unwitting souls to awaken it from its slumber.